Welcome in. This is a segment from the Slumpbuster Fantasy Football Podcast with Aris Blakeney. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
So let's get into these lists. We're going to start off with running backs because typically that's where you're going to start the draft is with some running backs. Right now we have top 5 running backs. We have Saquon, Kamara, McCaffrey, Gurley, and Lev Bell. How do you feel about those top 5?
Saquon at number 1, I have no problem with that. I think that he is, by all accounts, the number 1 running back in terms of ability in football. My only concern is just the offense around him and to see how that's going to pan out, because we have seen quality running backs taken down by the players around them. David Johnson was a prime example last year coming back from his injury because the Arizona offense was so porous. They couldn't really keep him sustainable. Even though David Johnson did finish as a number 1 running back, he just never was at that elite level that you probably drafted him for. When it comes to Alvin Kamara, with Mark Ingram gone, he's going to be taking on the majority of the work, so it's going to be interesting to see how he responds to that. He's a tough runner. He's very dynamic, very explosive, so he could challenge Saquon for that number 1 spot, and we could be talking about him as the number 1 running back by the end of the year. McCaffrey, we kind of mentioned that he bulked up this offseason, so it's going to be interesting to see if he takes on more of the early down work, or I should say more the running between the tackles work this year. We know he's a PPR monster, like 100 catches last year, 80 catches the year before. He's a stud. So especially if you're in a PPR league, if you're not drafting this guy early, it's just malicious to your team. Gurley is going to be the interesting one. So obviously we know he's dealing with that knee. It's just a matter of what he does with his touches, because at the end of the day, he is going to have less touches to work with. So if he could burst off a big run, score you a couple touchdowns, and make the most of his probably about roughly 15 carries a game, then that's going to be the value you're looking for. But there are potential weeks where, because of his limited carries, he doesn't necessarily produce as a running back 1 or quite Todd Gurley level. And then Lev Bell, off of a year of not playing, not necessarily because of injury, I don't know what to expect from him. The Jets did a lot of work to improve their offensive line, but I don't know if necessarily that their amalgamation of players is going to be at the same level that the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line was in terms of run blocking. And with someone like Lev Bell, who takes more of a patient running approach, I could see him taking a huge step back. I don't see him being in that top 3 at the end of the year.
Yeah, it is a weird year for running back, whereas the top 5 running backs all kind of have questions on their performance. Saquon being the offense around them. Kamara, can he really be a number 1? McCaffrey, the Panthers already stated that they are trying to look for a bigger back to take goal line work from him, which can limit his draft stock if he's not scoring a lot of touchdowns. If you're not in a PPR league, that's going to hurt you quite a bit. But he is one of the 1 running backs that's going to be flirting with that 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving, which will be a big boost for him. Gurley with the knee problem, and then Lev Bell, we've never seen a running back take a year off and come back. So that'll be definitely interesting. The next set of 5 is a pretty weird group. You have Delvin Cook coming off of an injury, James Conner, David Johnson last year. Had a weird year, still top 10 back, finished 10 last year in back. So he's still RB1, but he wasn't, you probably drafted him 1 or 2 overall last year, expecting big numbers from him from the year before he got hurt. Then you have Aaron Jones. You really don't know how Matt LaFleur's offense is going to look. And then you have Chubb, who I love Chubb. I had him last year. He killed it once they shipped Hyde out. But then with Hunt coming back, what's his role going to be?
When I'm looking at this, probably the running back that stands out the most to me is actually going to be Aaron Jones. Now that Aaron Jones is unburdened by Mike McCarthy's apparent dislike of him, I think that he has the highest ceiling out of this group of runners right now. Because when I look at James Conner, the problem with James Conner is I'm starting to hear Jalen Samuel's name come up a little bit more. So there is potential that he could lose a little bit more of the targets, which, again, PPR leagues, half-point PPR, that's going to hurt you in the long run. Delvin Cook, he's also being challenged by another running back. So I don't know necessarily if he's going to be able to sustain his production, and even his production as a whole went down significantly last year coming off of the ACL. He didn't quite look like that runner that he did in his rookie season. As far as David Johnson, I'm looking at this Arizona offensive line, and it's still so bad.
Yeah, I think they're ranked 31, just above Miami.
Yeah, no, they have had no luck establishing anything. I don't know what to expect out of this Arizona offense. Again, Cliff Kingsbury saying we're withholding stuff. We want to save some things for the regular season. But based off what I've seen, it's just terrible. And no matter what game plan he's withholding, he's not withholding the fact that his offensive line is bad. And then, let's see, I love Nick Chubb, but we did mention Kareem Hunt's name a little bit earlier. Kareem Hunt is going to come back at some point. And when he does come back, that's going to be the fantasy football playoffs. So if they're splitting carries towards the end, no matter how much work Chubb did in bringing you to the playoffs, it could get all unraveled just in those final few weeks. So that's kind of where I'm looking at when I look at this group of runners.
Yeah, he can turn into the Gurley of last year where you drafted Gurley high, and then towards the end of the year, you really couldn't rely on him. Hopefully it doesn't turn out like that. But let's go on to the next set. You got Damian Williams for the Chiefs, Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette, who says he's in the best shape of his life, Johnson out in Detroit, and Tariq Cowan, our first kind of third down utility back on this list. Any thoughts on any of these guys?
Joe Mixon is probably my favorite out of this group right now. You're drafting him right now potentially in the third round, but I could see him jumping up to that top 5 of runners. He has the ability. The offense is going to be more exciting right now with the Bengals. I think that he has worlds of potential in the passing game. And this team is going to be having to play catch-up. They still do have Giovanni Bernard, so that does make me a little bit nervous. But when I've seen Joe Mixon on the field, he has shown me that he has the ability to be an elite runner. So if you're looking for a guy in the third round that could be amongst the top-tier running back ones, this is the guy. Fournette, he's looking better. At the end of the day, when you look at his stat line, he's still never averaged more than 4 yards a carry. And when you look at the Jaguars, granted, they're moving from Bortles to Foles, but I don't think anyone's really scared of their passing attack still. So I still think he's going to see loaded boxes. So the problem's still not fixed there. Damian Williams, if you hit on an Andy Reid running back, you're going to be pretty happy at the end of the year. Problem with Damian Williams is he's a little banged up right now. He's never really shown that he can stay healthy. And they're even talking about another guy on their team as well who could challenge him for touches. So, like I said, Joe Mixon is my favorite guy out of this group.
Yeah, so Damian Williams, the problem I have with him is he's never been the guy. Whatever team he's been on, he's always been part of a committee. He's never been able to establish himself. That might end up playing here. Fournette, for being as big as he is, you'd think he'd be able to, get a little bit more yards per carry, but he's never had an offense. He's never had a quarterback around him. That may change, but they still don't have any receivers in Jacksonville. So, D.D. Westbrook is their number 1 right now. Do what you will with that. Johnson in Detroit. Detroit's had 1,000-yard rusher in the last 700 years. Barry Sanders was the last one that they've had. They're Detroit, who knows what they're going to do. He also hasn't shown that he can stay healthy. Then you have Tariq Cowan, who is like Mixon on this one, where you're going to catch a lot of balls, especially Mixon with A.J. Green being out. He might be a lot, PPR-wise, he's probably going to be in the look for a lot of swing passes, dump-offs. He might be in the passing game, a lot more. And then Tariq Cowan, he's going to get touches in that Nagy offense. They showed it last year where he had a pretty good year. He had 700 yards receiving. And as a running back, that's top of the league for receiving yards.
It's Darwin Thompson that's going to be challenging Damian Williams for touches. And when you talk about a guy with an injury history, and I noticed this a couple years ago when it came to players like Spencer Ware or Charkandrick West, if you get injured, you could get very easily replaced in this Andy Reid offense. So he's got to watch his role a little bit here. When it comes to Johnson, I think that he can establish himself also as a dominant running back too in your leagues. But the problem I do see potentially for him, at least, is that C.J. Anderson does exist on this roster as well. And C.J. is going to get at least 5 to 8 touches a game, which, depending on what part of the field is, maybe you lose a couple touchdowns here and there. Obviously, you don't want that from any of your players, specifically running back position.
Like you said, goal line work, you don't want to get vultured. And, that's the worst part of fantasy football is when they, do that fullback dive on the 2-yard line or something like that and give your touchdown from your star running back to the fullback position, which nobody ever has a fullback. Maybe they should add a fullback slot on fantasy. Who knows?
We're going to be talking about removing slots. So let's not talk about adding them.
Yeah, so you don't want Vulture, and C.J. Anderson is a bigger back who can take those touchdowns away from Johnson. All right, so let's go into the next set. You have Phillip Lindsay, Devontae Freeman, Kenyon Drake, James White, and Marlon Mack. How do you feel about Marlon Mack this year?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. I think that he's probably the best point right now in the Indianapolis Colts offense, probably the only real player that I'm excited about fantasy-wise. I think he has 3-down back potential. I think that he showed flashes last year. Like, he was really at that running back 1 tier at points. I think he's going to take a step back because right now, knowing that Jacoby Brissett is not going to duplicate what Andrew Luck's value is, defenses are going to be keying a little bit more on stopping the running game and making Brissett beat them. When it comes to other players on this list, I got to say that probably on my do not draft, I am not excited about Phillip Lindsay this year. And I'll explain that. Royce Freeman still is on this roster, and Royce Freeman was drafted fairly high by the Denver Broncos. He's looked good. He has the pedigree to be at minimum an early down back, potentially still some goal line touches, and that's going to reduce Lindsay's value if they're splitting carries.
Yeah, they drafted him in the 3rd round where he killed it at Oregon. He had 6 yards per carry last year. Freeman did in Denver. So Lindsay, they're already talking about that being a 50-50 split this year because Freeman is healthy. Last year he was battling an ankle injury all year. But in this group of people, my favorite running back is James White. This dude, if you are a PPR league, he is a PPR monster. He's only going to have, 2 carries for, 10 yards or something like that. But he will get you 10 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. That is developing into Brady's favorite target behind Edelman. And with Gronk out this year, there's a lot of, targets to go around. And I can see a lot of them going to James White.
James White definitely has an established role in this offense. Regardless if he's in the backfield or out the slot, he's going to get his touches. He's going to get a few catches each and every game. So I don't think you have to necessarily worry about him. I think he's one of the safest picks you can make. Though I think his ceiling is kind of capped. In his same backfield is where you worry about him getting reduced. Obviously, Sony Michel could potentially be a 3-down back himself. Didn't really use him in the passing game last year, but I think that could change for him. So that may hurt James White as far as his out of the backfield touches. But like I said, he's still going to be guaranteed for at least 5 to 6 catches. So you know where his floor is. You can feel safe about drafting him. So, yeah, I think that's just kind of my feelings on James White.
Currently, he's going, at the 82nd pick, right around there. And last year, he finished as the 8th best running back in the league. And that was because of all of those catches that he had. So, he's going to be an interesting player to watch for. Next 5, we actually have his backfield mate. But first, we got Derrick Henry, Sony Michel, Mark Ingram, Josh Jacobs, who's going to be a number 1 running back in Oakland, and then Geis, who's going to be very interesting coming off of that ACL injury in Washington. But right now, he's still fighting with Adrian Peterson, who's 700 years old and still in the league, running the ball very well. So let's see if he can take over that job from Adrian Peterson.
Definitely one hyperbole on this aging. 7,000 years for the Lions, 700 years for Adrian Peterson.
Adrian Peterson is old. I've kind of gotten away from these guys that are really old in the league. Him, Adam Vinatieri, and Tom Brady, saying that time is going to stop him down. Even Breeze, who's in this year 40 season. So that those guys are still at the top of their game and still producing. So, can this young guy, actually take over the backfield? I haven't projected as taking it, but we'll see.
Guys, I like what I see. He runs tough. He runs fierce. But so far, we've only got to see him in preseason highlights. Going back to last year, he was actually injured in week 3 of last year's preseason. So I'm excited to see him out there. I'm excited to see him out there stiff-arming people straight through the ground. It just tells you how dynamic of a runner he is. Problem I have right now is, so we know this line is going to be a little bit devalued with what's going on with Trent Williams. And then we look at kind of the offense around him. It's just unexciting. The Gruden offense over there is just unexciting. When I look at also kind of like running backs you have in this tier, probably the most excited person I am about is Sony Michel for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Derrick Henry is just going to be drafted way too high given how he produced down the stretch run of last year. It's going to make people a little bit excited. Could potentially you see Mike Vrabel double down on the power running game? Yes, but I think that they're going to mix and match with Dion Lewis too much to Henry's detriment. When it comes to Ingram, can definitely say that he also has a bit of what you call an established floor, because the Ravens are going to run, and they're going to run a lot. They're not a dynamic passing game, so they're just going to have to work with what they have. Mobile quarterbacks generally are better for the running back position as a whole. So I like Mark Ingram as a baseline running back too. I don't think he's going to be able to jump into that next tier. And I also don't see him dropping because his value is pretty set in place.
Yeah, they're not really going to throw the ball much. The number one receiver on that team might be their tight end, Mark Andrews. He might be the leading receiver for the whole team this coming season. But we really don't know what they're going to do with the running back position out in Baltimore. They have him. They have like 7 other running backs in that room right now fighting for position, and they all are going to go in some sort of timeshare with Ingram getting the most out of it. But they're still going to be in a timeshare like they used last year. And then their quarterback, he had more rushing attempts than he had completions last year. So he's going to eat the ball up a lot as well. He might even flirt with 20 rushes in the game instead of, your running back getting those. It's going to go to your quarterback. He's going to be pretty safe for your third running back on your squad.
Do you see any of these guys potential being a running back one?
In the bottom, the biggest person is going to be Josh Jacobs. We really don't know what that offense is going to look like this year. I feel like once you have Tyrell Williams and AB on the field, you're going to get a lot of defenses playing pass, especially with Carr, who can air the ball out. So that might leave a little bit of 7 people boxes, 6 people boxes, opening up running lanes for Jacobs to sneak into that top 12 running backs in the league. So that's where I could see him sneaking into, not really establishing himself as a number one back, but kind of just irking his way up into it.